Welcome back. All right, so I have 10 items on the board for this video that I don't feel like deserve necessarily their own video, but they are 10 things that I want to discuss that don't really fit into a news video, don't fit into a review or a preview. So here we are. The first thing I want to talk about is something that we have talked about here and there, and when I've been doing reviews, for instance, I'll write down the shots are 12 to 10 for one team over another, and then at the end of the period, I look at the shots and they're 10 to 6. And I'm like, that's weird. But the shot adjustments are going on during games and after games way more than I've ever seen. So what's happening here, the speculation is that because you have prop bets and because shots are part of the bets, the bets and the whole gambling side of things, that the NHL is making sure this is 100% accurate. So every shot taken at a goaltender has to be one that's going to hit the net. I don't think they cared as much about that before. It'd be interesting to go back and watch the Quebec-Boston game where Ron Tugnut makes, 70 saves on 73 shots and was beloved by the Boston crowd that night because he had a fantastic game, and see how many of those, by today's standards, might not count as shots. Because if they were near the goal, they were kind of counted as a shot on net. So while there are some that want to say the goaltending's bad right now, it's not. And I feel like point number one leads into point number two. Because there's something I've noticed with the National Hockey League now. Going back to NHL 94, if you want to score an NHL 94, it has to be on one-timers. And I found that kind of irritating. I was like, well, not every goal in the NHL is the same. And the one-timer is guaranteed to go in. But, I mean, come on now. Well, here we are all these years later. And glitch goals are definitely a thing now in the National Hockey League. So, point shot that's tipped in. Wraparounds are pretty common. Pass from behind the net that's buried, which, yes, was brought to us by Wayne Gretzky back in the 80s. A lot of his assists were from behind the net. It was called his office for a reason. But it feels like there's the ones that they roof it from in close, and there's also the banking it off the goaltender into the net. These are all things that if they occurred regularly in a video game, people would say, you got to fix this. All I have to do is go to a corner and I just bank it in off the goalie's shoulder. This is not great. And it does feel like a lot of the goals now look very, very similar. Cross, ice, pass, and buried. And for that reason, I felt like I had to put glitch goals on the board because there are so many that are so very similar. And when I'm watching a bunch of games and I'm seeing what the goals are, I know that it's going to be probably 4 or 5 different ways. And if it goes in the net, and it's not necessarily one of those goals, then immediately we go, wow, the goalie should have stopped that. Because those are the ones that the goalies traditionally, and especially right now, have been stopping. And so it really stands out. I feel bad for goalies because you'll watch a guy get lit up for 6 or 7 goals against, and all of them are from the doorstep. All of them are from like a foot away, cross ice passing in, past a screen. Screens are really, really important, getting that traffic in front of the net. We'll talk about that again, though, again later on in this video, but it does feel like almost every goal looks very, very similar. Unless you're talking about a really gifted goal scorer that can go around everybody and then around the goaltender and put it in the net. Those are pretty plays and everything. But a lot of these are, you can tell it's a system. That's all the practice they take, and it works. Now, I wanted to talk about this part too. So this isn't related to the game, and this is why I'm not going to title this as 10 things on the ice, because it's not all on the ice stuff I wanted to talk about. So the fact that now in the National Hockey League we have very few trades, almost none really during the regular season up until trade deadline, and then we'll get a bunch of trades at trade deadline, and people, usually generation beneath mine, will go, well, see there were a lot of trades this season, but I do remember watching hockey as a kid. I was always interested in the trades that would happen in October, November, December, and you'd see like a player go into a real slump, and immediately would be, they should probably trade the guy. He could use a change of scenery. And now what we're seeing is players being kind of forced to stay in one location where maybe it's not beneficial to them because of the fact that every team's up against the cap and trades are far more difficult to make. But it does mean that for the insiders and for the media, this is why we get so many repetitive headlines and we get so much. I think sometimes there's an over-analysis with players and with teams that goes on. And I think that you're only as good as your last game is becoming more and more of the way of things. A guy can have 5 or 6 great games, he has one lousy game, and then there's a headline right away of what happened, what's wrong with this guy, and they'll have a picture of him rolling his eyes. And I do feel like the fact there's no trades, there's fewer moves to discuss, means that for people who are media or insiders, so you're an insider, you get news of, well, yeah, these teams called and those teams called, and not much going on. Well, now as an insider, you got to report something. So your report is, yeah, the phones are lighting up. This team called that team, and this team offered this, and that team said no. And it can get kind of repetitive, and it's gotten to the point now where a lot of people are saying, hey, the insiders don't have a clue what's going on. The reality is the trade market's very quiet, and they still have to produce content, part of their job. They can't just say, well, nothing happening here, I'm just going to take the next month off, because they can't really do that. So I do feel kind of bad for them on some level, because it would be more interesting if we saw blockbuster trades. And I'm not talking about like a 7th rounder for a 4th liner. I'm talking about actual, trades that you can sink your teeth into and go, hey, this is a really good deal for these players. One player that comes up a lot right now around the Rangers, Zibanejad. There's no way that with Zibanejad's play and everything, if we weren't in a salary cap era, if we weren't dealing with every team being up against it, somebody would have taken him on if we weren't in the salary cap era. And so that's one example I would use of a player who I think's been in one place longer than he would have been. And so he's got to kind of work it out with the New York Rangers, because his contract's very difficult to take on. This isn't a random order. Number 4 is cross checks are up. One thing that I've noticed recently is, so they tried cracking down on cross checks, and that is partly shown in the fact there are so many goals that go past a screen, because defensemen used to get that one cross check that, I'm just going to push this guy right out from the front of the net so my goalie can see the shot. They can't get away with that now, but there's still a lot of cross-checking going on along the boards and in the corners that was being called a couple years ago when they were cracking down on it, and they're not. So we're back to, well, the first 3 cross-checks weren't a penalty, but that fourth one was. And it's like, but if it's not a legal play, why are the first 3 okay? And I say this only because we don't do that with anything else. We don't do that with slashing. We don't do that with roughing. Well, not like, well, he only punched him 3 times, and he gave him the 4th for flinching. So I think the guy needs to go to the box for flinching. But it is interesting to see how penalties are called or not called, and that cross-checking is just part of the game. So it is bizarre, but it is part of the game, unless it's right in front of the net. Those ones they're still calling, usually, mostly. But I'm not here to talk about the officiating very much, because I know that there are a lot of opinions about the officiating. I think they do the best they can. I really do. I think we get all these slow motion replays. Just show it at regular time. And go, what do you think? Look, real time. Well, can we slow that down? Hey, the officials didn't get a chance to slow that down. They had to watch it in real time. All right, analytics have changed the game. So shot adjustments, partly because of the gambling sites, but the gambling sites also have on there a lot of the analytic stuff. And so you're not just betting on who's going to score and who's going to win anymore. And the analytics side has changed the game in that every single team is using analytics now, which is part of the reason why glitch goals are going to be all the rage. This is how you beat goaltenders in the National Hockey League. We have, analyzed all these. This is the best place to shoot from. This is the best kind of shot to take. And so it is going to lead to more scoring, but analytically too, you can adjust defensively and go, okay, so this is where everybody's scoring, keep them away from the net, which is why when I'm doing reviews, I always make a point to point out, hey, this team had a lot of zone time, but they were kept to the outside, because your goals usually are not going to come from the outside unless it's a tip in front of the net on a point shot, right? So the analytics have definitely changed how the game is played, and it has changed the coaching. It has changed the whole structure of NHL teams. The analytics are not 100% of the game, obviously, but they are definitely a tool that's being used, and it has had a dramatic effect on the game in general. Fighting has kind of balanced out. There's always been this fear that fighting's going to disappear and the NHL is going to get rid of it. I don't think it will. I don't think they have to. So 2021-2022, according to hockeyfights.com, we had 331 fights in the NHL. The following season, 334. Last year, it dropped to 311. This year, it's at 150. We're almost to the halfway mark, so we're going to end up with more than 300. And I would think that as we get closer to the playoffs, you might be more likely to see some fighting in some of these games, these rivalry games, as teams are fighting for playoff spots. So I feel like fighting is balanced out, and fear that it's going to be gone. I think that's been proven wrong. The NHL still uses fights in their highlight packages, so if the NHL was so upset with fighting and wanted to get rid of it, it's not going to be showing it in highlight packages. One thing, and coming back to the insider media part here, negative draws more interest than positive. And I've noticed this for years now. If I do a video on a team that is just an absolute mess, and I do a video that same day on a team that's playing really, really well, and I want to highlight what's going really well for them, I can almost guarantee, and I don't know that it matters which teams they are, the team that's playing poorly and the focus on how things have gone wrong will get more attention. And if you're a media person and you are, in need of clicks, that's kind of what, feeds you there. The negative's going to get you more money than the positive will. The negative's going to get your name out there a little bit more than the positive. And I don't think that's a good thing, but I think it's just human nature. I think we're more likely to watch a video of, let's just say that it's rush hour, and you have a choice between watching the traffic cam when it's just rush hour and things are just slow, or it's a video that shows a car crash during rush hour. People are going to want to watch because you're going to be like, why would you want to? Nothing happens on that one. So that kind of seems to be the feeling when a team's doing well. It's like, yeah, they're doing well. Who cares? Oh, this team's falling apart. Yeah, I want to find out what's going on. So it's definitely something that I think leads to more discussions of the negative. We've talked about the gossipy stuff lately and as well, and it's just it's part of sports now. I know this isn't a hockey thing. I know it's just part of sports and media and news and everything else. Um, Injury vagueness surprises me because we mentioned how the gambling side of things means that you want those shots to be 100% accurate, which means fewer shots are going to be counted as shots on goal. You're not going to be adding shots on goal. You're going to be taking shots away. That's generally been the case. But the injury vagueness surprises me because there was speculation years ago that all these gambling apps would say, hey, you can't do this. We have to know how long a guy's going to be out for our apps and for what we, how we do things. We need to know the specifics of the injury. What's hurt and how long is he going to be out? And we've gotten to the point now where teams are almost where I predicted years ago, where I was like, yeah, it's just going to be, it's his body. It's a part of his body that's hurt, and he might be back in a week. It could be a month. He may never return. We don't really know yet. Or it's just psychological. That walking boot is because he's sad. People wear walking boots when they're sad because it makes them feel better because their foot is well supported. I just that's almost where we're to at this point. We're almost there. We're almost there. The vagueness has become even more vague, and we were talking about that years ago with upper body, lower body. Now we don't even get that sometimes. Now it's just undisclosed. It's undisclosed, and it's either day to day, week to week, month to month, or his career's finished. And I haven't heard any outcry from any of the gambling sites at this point. Nothing that I've seen public, but you have to think there's somebody somewhere saying, we got to have more information than this. Soft. I have noticed that almost any time that you talk about players now, it's just, they're all soft. No, that guy's soft. Oh, I don't like him either. He's soft. They're all soft. That's soft. This player's soft. So it's weird to me because I think if you reach the National Hockey League and you fight your way through all these lower leagues to get there, you're probably not a soft hockey player. I reserve that, honestly, for me to look at a player and go, man, that's soft. It has to be a guy who will not go in the corners at all. It has to be a player who shies away from the puck and just hands it to the other team. And it's rare. And I feel like it's more rare now than it was before, partly because analytics have changed the game. So the guys who are not producing and just costing you defensively, the analytics will really bear that out. So a lot of the guys who I might have thought played a soft game don't make it to the National Hockey League now because that style of hockey that they play is more likely to be called out. than it would have been, say, a generation or two ago. I don't think there's players in the league. I think every player plays a different role. I think that your skill players play a different role than your physical players. Um, and that just everybody's got their own role to play on a team. So that's why I don't come out. Oh, this guy's really soft, because I'm not. I'm not gonna do it. It wasn't that long ago that there were plenty of people who would say that of Jack Eichel. Now Eichel's had the disc replacement surgery. He's become a better player. He's got a Stanley Cup ring, and I don't hear it anymore about Eichel. So it's a miracle. He just all of a sudden isn't. So it's a term I'll never use. It's a term that I think gets kind of lazy because you can apply it to almost any player you just don't like. And so rather than saying I don't like his style of play, you can just go, he's soft, standard soft, just soft player. All right, cool. Um, I feel like in today's game, we see a lot of comebacks, and that's talked about from the perspective of, well, teams execute better, and they do. But I think part of it is players and teams are scouted much better than they used to be. You have camera angles from all over. Every game is televised. So before you go into a game against a team, there isn't that unknown side of it that you would have had. So a team can't really sneak up on you the way they could have in years past, in generations past especially. And players don't sneak up on you either, because anytime that I'm watching a game now at the start, you're going to hear somebody saying, okay, so this guy's going for them, this guy's going, this goaltender is weak glove side, this goaltender has a problem with the blocker side. If you're going to score on them, for some reason their goals are going 5-hole. This is all information that you didn't used to hear at the start of games, and I guarantee you, if the announcers are talking about it, the team has talked about it. Where the players are told, hey, this is where this goaltender might be a little bit weaker on the shots. How many games have we seen where a team's just shooting high? And part of that is because that's generally where a lot of the goals go, is high either corner. You've got to beat them up high. Goaltenders now are 6'5" and taller, so the lower half of the net's pretty well protected. The top half of the net's pretty well protected too, but you've got to be a little more precise in your shots. And so players and teams are scouted better, and it does lead to you know what's interesting to me too, and I didn't put it on the board. One thing that's definitely changed for me in this game is how quickly teams switch from playing just defense to playing offense, and vice versa, where it's, attack, and then all of a sudden it's defense. And I did talk about how that one item that drives me crazy is teams that will kind of sit on a lead, and not sit on a lead in a proactive way, but kind of a lazy way, where they're just staying back in their own zone, and they're not really trying to score. They're not concerned with that, but they're also not really doing a good job of getting the puck and controlling the puck, and so it can get frustrating to watch. But it is I think the NHL now is the best it's ever been. That's me personally. I know there's a lot of people that will not necessarily agree with that, but I think the game's the best that it's been, and I think we are now in an era where there are so many very talented players. I see players now who I think are very talented and very good that are relegated to third and fourth line minutes because there are just so many talented players in the league and in the game, and that's why I'm not as opposed to the expansion for the same reasons as others, because a lot of the comments on talent dilution, I remember back in the 90s what talent dilution looked like. We're not seeing that at this stage. It got ugly once we got up to the Columbus and Minnesota expansion. There were definitely some players in the league at that point that maybe might not have been NHL caliber, because you added 9 teams in about a decade. And the NHL's not looking at anything like that now. And generally, if you're adding a team here and a team there, the players you're adding to the league are, there's going to be some that maybe aren't as talented as other guys, but there are players in the American Hockey League that I think could take a regular shift at the NHL level and be perfectly fine with it. So we'll see what the NHL does. But I wanted to talk about these 10 items today. These are just 10 things I wanted to talk about today. And so let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. What trend have you noticed in the National Hockey League, or just in hockey in general? Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. It is greatly appreciated. Channel just passed 336,000 subscribers overnight, so thank you for that. I will talk to you again soon.